I want to welcome onto the program a very special guest. He is a former CIA operative. He's also a experienced investigator, anti-corruption investigator, among many other things. He's also a regular on a number of very popular podcasting platforms and video casting platforms on the web. His name is Larry Johnson. He's joining us on the live link right now. Larry, how are you?
I'm well, Patrick. Good to see you again, man.
It's great to see you as well, Larry. Last time we saw each other was, yes, halfway around the world.
Yeah, in the airport at Moscow or at the hotel.
Yeah. So, Larry, I mean, there's so much to talk about. I know that a lot of your time that you dedicate to talking about these important issues that are happening around the world. History is happening now as we speak. Our politicians, some of them are meeting the moment on this. Many aren't. We've got a lot to discuss there. I want to start with what's happening in the Middle East with Israel, situation in Gaza. You saw this horrific attack on the aid workers from the World Central Kitchen. Suddenly, Larry, this has moved the dial in Washington. Everything else didn't. And now can you explain to us from your point of view how you're reading this whole situation?
Yeah, they killed some Europeans and Americans. Others have described it as they killed some white guys, but one of the folks killed was a Palestinian. I've actually got sort of a unique connection to all of this. I mean, Jose Andres, he set up the World Central Kitchen. Well, Jose and I were both members of the same golf club in Washington, D.C. at the Potomac at Avenel Farm, which is about a mile south of the Congressional Country Club, which is a very exclusive place. And so, I was acquainted with him. We were not friends and, we didn't eat together, that kind of thing. But, Andres came to fame over the years because he refused to open a restaurant in Donald Trump's new hotel 2 blocks from the White House. And boy, he became just celebrated with the left and the Democrats. So now we jump ahead, and he's got this World Central Kitchen that's touted as this great charity. I always look at the money aspect of this. He's not doing this for free. They're getting paid, and they're getting both through contributions and through government contracts. And he didn't say one damn word about the slaughter of Palestinians until his own people got it. And he thought he had it wired. Oh, we're coordinating with the Israelis. They're telling them, we're going to be here, and then we're going to be there. We've dotted all the I's, crossed all the T's. We're on the inside. We're part of the, we got the blessing of Joe Biden. And then he, at least he was smart enough to realize they were deliberately, consciously, not just targeted, they were hunted down. Because these drone operators, I've spent 23 years scripting terrorism exercises for U.S. military special operations, and I had access to drone feeds. And they inside the military, they call it kill TV, because you get to watch somebody get killed. And a drone operator sits there, is not by him or herself. They're with other drone operators. And there's screens where the officers that are in charge can monitor and watch what they're doing. So these people had, assuming they're enlisted, maybe they were like a junior lieutenant, but then you got standing behind them a captain, a major, a lieutenant colonel, probably a colonel for sure, and maybe even in that room a general. And when the person made first they had to identify the vehicles, and once they did the identification, then they had to request permission to engage. Because the drone operator doesn't have the power or authority just to hit a button and go, boom. No. You got to get direction. Can I fire? Permission to fire. They got permission. Not once, not twice, but 3 times. When they could see people were trying to escape, trying to evade. They hunted them down and killed them. Well, good. At least Andres, I give him credit. He was grief-stricken, horrified. Oh my God, these people are murdering people deliberately. Well, it's like, no shit. That's only been going on for 6 months. It started on October 7th when the Israelis slaughtered some of their own people in desperation to stop Hamas. They killed, I calculate at least, if not more than 50% of the casualties of Israelis that day were caused by the Israeli Defense Force. And then they proceeded, wantonly killing Palestinians, aid workers, healthcare workers, journalists. Do you realize that of the journalists, on average, the Israelis are killing 20 a month? So 6 months, we're almost at 20. For aid workers, they're killing almost 40 a month. Let those numbers sink in. Let's compare it to Ukraine, the war in Ukraine. In the war in Ukraine, since 2014 until now, the number of journalists killed is averaging 1 journalist per year. Israel's topping that by 19 in 1 month. And then the next month, 20 more. The next month, 20 more. So this is, let's put it in the context. This has been a long-standing abuse, war crime by Israel. And it's not low-level guys just acting, on their own, out of control. This is a complete failure of the chain of command. This is a complete indictment of the Israeli military, top to bottom.
And I want to ask you on that you're talking about drone technology and the sort of trend towards, we saw in the Obama administration, they're using these digital signatures in order to triangulate targets rather than human intelligence, and more autonomous systems now. And Israel relying on this for their border fences, a lot of AI, less of a human element, more of a so-called AI or autonomous or automated element. So this is where the trend's going, Larry. And a lot of people are concerned, Larry, that this means there's going to be more collateral damage, not less collateral damage. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's an excuse, because they this was AI, garbage in, garbage out. The reality is you don't take the human element out, because there still has to be, if you say, okay, yeah, our system has identified this as a viable target. Permission to fire, sir. Well, that sir's got to turn around and say, you got to check up the chain of command. What are your rules of engagement? You always, it's one thing to say, hey, if we see somebody with a weapon, we're going to shoot them. And we saw this with the whole Julian Assange, the famous tape that Julian Assange released, where the U.S. Apache helicopter pilots thought they saw a gun. In fact, it was a TV camera, and they blew the hell out of all these journalists and civilians. Not a single combatant in the group. So the technology just makes it easier to reach out, but there's always the human element. Now, we're not at Terminator level where these robots are off doing their own thing without any human control. These are ultimately, the human beings are guiding, directing, and executing.
You mentioned that infamous video which went out on WikiLeaks, a collateral murder, I think it was called, of that scene that you just described, Larry. And what a absolute game changer that was when that video got into public circulation, and hugely embarrassing, of course, for the U.S. government. Now, let me ask you this, Larry. If that feed exists, would there be, theoretically, somebody has a video of what happened to the World Central Kitchen vehicles?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And if this is leaked, Larry, what kind of impact would that have on this current issue?
It would expose the Israelis that they're liars, complete liars. And I guarantee you, it was not one drone. I would imagine there were at least 2, if not 3 drones, because the drones can serve. You got drones that serve a variety of different functions. One can be for strict monitoring, visual monitoring, picking up the image. The other can be an actual attack drone that will be able to carry a weapons load that it will fire. You got some drones that are capable of intercepting conversations. both electronic communications on the ground as well as actual voices on the ground. So, I mean, the drones have a whole range of capabilities that can come to bear. But I guarantee you one thing, that is recorded, absolutely recorded.
Yeah, that would be, I think that would have a big impact on the European and North American conversation with regards to their government support of Israel. Makes it a very valuable piece of video if it makes it into the public sphere, Larry.
I anticipate that it may actually make it out at some point.
So, a white hat within the U.S. also might be able to get access to that, or the British.
Yeah,
somebody might.
Yeah, so or somebody with a conscience within the Israeli Defense Force. I keep calling the IOF, the Israeli Occupation Force, because that's what they are. This kind of conduct, again, this is not an aberration. Remember the 3 Israeli hostages taken by Hamas who escaped, 3 young guys in their 20s. They apparently served in the army previously, which was why they were pretty damn nervous about approaching a bunch of Israeli soldiers, because they knew they'd be possibly shot and killed, which they were. And they came out with their bare-chested, shirts off, waving a white shirt. Didn't matter. Israelis lit them up. They didn't have weapons. There's video after video after video of unarmed Palestinian children, teenagers, youth, men, women getting shot. They're not doing anything. They have nothing threatening that would make them a hostile threat. And then you remember the Israeli sniper shot and killed those 2 Palestinian Christian women. One was in her 60s, and she was walking her mother, who was in her 80s, to the bathroom. And they got lit up, killed. So it's like, yeah, I feel it's a shame what happened to these 7 World Central Kitchen workers. But hey, welcome to the club, folks. It's a big club. Over 30,000, 32,000 members who didn't choose to be a part of it. But the Israelis made them a part of it because they have no regard for human life.
And Larry, just for a moment, I want to divert to in America. So I came through the U.S. public school system, and there's a lot. We're kind of taught to revere the Israeli military, the IDF, their intelligence services. It's the most disciplined army in the world, the best intelligence in the world. All of these things that just become a kind of a given in your mind anyway, in the American psyche.
Right.
And so much of this has been shattered in the last 6 months, in a very, very short space of time. Think of all of the decades of messaging, propaganda, public relations, all of these things to build this image of Israel's military as something that's special and should be revered.
Right.
What is how far have they fallen here, and what are the ramifications going forward of this, Larry?
Well, I'm laughing because so back in the summer of 1990, after Saddam had invaded Kuwait, and we were looking at a U.S. response, I was the State Department Counterterrorism Office. My immediate boss was a retired Marine colonel, Dominic Richard Aloysius Gannon, like a second father to me. And he's an experienced combat vet, did 2 tours in Vietnam, had been in Jordan quite a bit. And so I asked him, what do you anticipate is going to happen? And he says, now we're going to find out why everybody thinks the Israelis are so great. I go, well, why is that? He goes, they've only fought Arabs. Now, it's not intended to be an insult to Arabs, but the Israelis have never really fought a first-rate army. They fought second-rate armies that were poorly trained, poorly led, poorly equipped. And yet they perpetuate this myth that, oh boy, we're really skilled. And I give you an example. So I am a pistol instructor. I'm a firearms instructor. I can teach people both rifle, pistol. I'm authorized to train instructors. So I bring some experience to this. The Israelis, when they train their soldiers, teach them with a semi-automatic pistol. The semi-automatic pistol is one you usually see in all the movies, where you fire it and the slide goes back and forth and it ejects the shell casing. But the Israelis, that normally for that to work properly, you want to have a piece of ammunition already chambered. So when you have to pull your gun, you point, press the trigger, and it'll fire. That's not what the Israelis do. The Israelis they don't chamber around. And so when they draw, they come out, then they quickly reciprocate the slide, move it back to chamber the round. Why do they do that? I'll send you the video. The instructor explains, well, we don't have enough time to train our troops to do it right. So they're basically doing what I call special ed for firearms. They don't trust their own soldiers to safely and properly handle a loaded firearm. So they teach them and train them from the outset, keep it unloaded until the very last minute. That's the problem with Israel. It's a volunteer army. And it's not a full-time army by and large. And so normally, like in the U.S. Army or even in German, Russian, if you've got somebody who's in the position as a staff sergeant, that's a senior, non-commissioned, enlisted spot. That means you're responsible for maybe a company of soldiers, 150 soldiers. Or first sergeant could be in charge of several companies. But the point of this is these guys are between the ages of, say, 28, 32, 33 years of age. In Israel, what you got staff sergeants that are 21 years of age. That means they don't have experience. They've just been given a rank. And, a lot of times the way it works in the U.S. military, a new lieutenant freshly out of West Point is going to be assigned a sergeant that's a senior non-commissioned officer. So here you got a 22-year-old lieutenant, maybe 23, with a 28, 29-year-old sergeant who will be telling him, yeah, sir, you don't want to do that. And the smart officers learn to listen to these senior enlisted. Because as they go along and move up the chain of command and get some years of experience, then all of a sudden, they've done it for a while. And what you got in the Israeli military, you got people who are captains and majors who are at the age of, that would be a normal lieutenant in the U.S. military. And captain and majors are usually like 2 to 3 steps above a lieutenant. So the Israeli reputation is so grossly exaggerated. And you've seen it in their conduct. They are undisciplined. They are poorly trained. They have poor fire discipline. They don't obey orders. The orders were those 3 Israeli hostages that were murdered by their own colleagues. The shooters, the other soldiers were given orders not to shoot, and they still ignored the orders and fired away.
So this is like, it can explain just the general culture of recklessness, kind of ham-fisted operations.
Yes.
Blunt force. Yeah. This is exactly what we've seen over the last 6 months.
Yeah, exactly. It's a lack of training and experience, number one, but it's also a lack of leadership because the leaders set the standard. And when the soldiers see the leaders saying, no, it's okay to shoot an unarmed person, the rule of engagement is unless they're carrying a weapon and you can see the weapon in their hand, you don't shoot them. Israelis shoot them all the time. All the time. We're not talking 1 or 2. It's now in the thousands.
So all of this kind of flies in the face of the mythology And the end result is, by the way, they're trying to do another mass mobilization. The Israelis, they're calling people back early, but at the same time, people are fleeing. People with the means, many of them have fled and are, hiding out, let's say in Goa or in, Miami or Brazil or hanging out on the beach. So what about Israel going forward? I mean, what's your assessment on the sustainability of this approach that they have chosen? They've really kind of locked in to a certain agenda here. What do you think?
Yeah. No, they can't sustain it, and they're crazy. Why do I say they're crazy? The other day when they bombed that Iranian consulate in Damascus was an act of war, or was a war crime. We can put it as both. And Israel is intent on invading southern Lebanon with the goal of destroying Hezbollah. Their senior generals on the record saying it. Their defense ministers on the record saying it. They did a poll of Israelis at 71%. Oh yeah, we ought to invade Lebanon and take out Hezbollah. Israel tried that back in 2006, and they got their ass kicked. Now, in the intervening years, Israel has not become more powerful and Hezbollah weaker. In fact, I would argue just the opposite. Hezbollah has become stronger, more capable, better trained, better led, is as well equipped as the Israelis are. And if the Israelis are dumb enough to follow through on this, which I think they will, it's likely to destroy them. It will put the nation of Israel at risk of being able to survive because their military will be defeated. And when that happens, that's going to set off political dynamite inside Israel.
And this is a big debate point that in your circles as well. I've watched some of the programs that you appear on. One of the big debates is how and when is Iran going to respond? And we see this in the conversation with Russia when Ukraine's hitting targets inside Russia, hitting Moscow with drone attacks. Why don't the Russians respond? When are they going to respond? They need to send a strong message. They're saying that about Iran after this, like you said, a total violation of the Vienna Convention, an act of war by any other name. That's what happened. Yeah. But we're seeing this restraint. We see it with Russia. We see it with Iran. We even to some degree with Hezbollah. This calculated restraint. What's your kind of assessment of this? Is this a strategy? Is this something we can predict? What do you think?
Well, I think let's take Russia as the first case. They're absolutely responding every day. They've taken out the thermal power plants, the hydroelectric power plants. They basically knocked out all the electricity in Ukraine east of the Dnieper River. They're using with increased frequency the glide bombs, 1,500 kilogram and 3,000 kilogram on fixed Ukrainian positions. They're pushing and conducting attacks all along a 600-mile front, which that's an enormous amount of distance, particularly when you're doing it with about 400,000 soldiers. Ukraine does not have the soldiers to cover that, so Russia now is enjoying the luxury of pushing here, pushing north, pushing south, pushing in the middle, and Ukraine's left guessing, trying to run to stop it. But Russia is responding. What they're doing is destroying the Ukrainian military capability, which will lead to a collapse of Ukraine. I know some people expect, they're going to go in and they're going to absolutely kill Budanov or Zelensky, and they may do that now. Before, I think they were steering clear of targeting some of the senior leadership, and I believe part of that reason was because Russia has intelligence assets in those facilities and offices and didn't want to risk killing people who were keeping them advised of what was going on. So that's one other consideration. But Israel, this attack at the Crocus City Center, Yeah, it was a terrible attack, but the people in the Donbass and Donetsk have been living with that for 10 years. In fact, it was in December. There was a Christmas program being presented, a concert in the city of Donetsk, and it got hit with HIMARS. Came through the roof, killed the singer, killed a bunch of the audience members. What's the difference? Just the body count, that's all. And the fact that it was done remotely, but it was done with U.S. weapons. So, yeah, this notion that, do we have proof that the United States is involved? You got proof that the United States, United Kingdom, they've been enabling and facilitating terrorism against Russians since the start of the special military operation. They didn't actually have to have physically somebody on the ground. So Russia's dealing with it. Iran is a little bit different case. Iran has been exercising. They don't want to get into a direct fight with the United States yet. They've got a variety. I think they're going to content themselves with arming and equipping Hezbollah with greater capability than they've had and make them a much more formidable force against Israel. At the same time, it looks like they had ordered, after that attack on the Two Towers base in Jordan 4 months ago, it looks like Iran ordered a stand down of the Shia militia throughout Iraq and Syria. They may reactivate them because, I don't know, many people haven't paid attention to this. In the last 36 hours, 48 hours, in Baluchistan, which is in southeast Iran, there was a terrorist attack launched on Iranian security officials, police stations. And this was done by groups based in Baluchistan. Long time CIA presence there, long time. Going back, I know for a fact, going back to 1979, because there were intelligence assets working with CIA then. They were passing information to the relatives who were running a rug store there in Bethesda, Maryland. I lived behind the rug store. I only found this out later. But, so Iran's looking at that and coming, I think, to the realization that Russia did. You know what? We're at war with the West. They're at war with us. So we better prepare and act accordingly. But the West, despite all their bravado and tough talk, they can't even beat the Houthis. All right? They can't beat the Houthis. Been bombing them now for 4 months. Hasn't stopped them one bit. And now what we've seen, early on there were reports that the Biden administration went to the Iranians and said, hey, could you help us out with the Houthis and ask them to back off and stop this? And I don't know if Iran said, hey, go pound sand or, we'll talk to them, but they do their own thing. But now the Biden administration's put word out to the Houthis, hey, we'll take you off the terrorist list if you stop hitting ships in the Red Sea. So they're Monty Hall. Let's make a deal. It's ludicrous. So if we can't handle the Houthis, how in the name of God do we think we're going to handle the Iranians?
But isn't that the plan? Happen. Isn't that what Israel would like to draw the United States
absolutely.
into a confrontation with Iran, right?
Yeah, right.
But is anyone in Washington dumb enough to take the bait on that?
Yes. The long line of stupid people. Yeah, absolutely. It is. There's still, fortunately, a few with sanity walking around. But, you listen to some of the talk, and these people want to nuke Gaza. You've had a Republican congressman talking about nuking Gaza. The inhumanity of these people is shocking.
Not to mention, if you nuke Gaza, the fallout's going to affect the Israelis as well. I mean, it's just a basic.
That means, but Patrick, that means you got to have second order thinking. That's why these people are like teenagers. They're only thinking, I'm in the heat of passion. They're not thinking, what happens if she gets pregnant? And then you don't think down the line. We're just going to do this, and you're not thinking about what could be the reaction. we're going to impose sanctions on Russia. That'll teach them. Yeah, how'd that work out? Well, it destroyed 52 years of U.S. policy, was predicated upon keeping Russia and China apart. It brought Russia and China together in one of the strongest alliances in recent memory. Way to go, Biden. Not sure you intended that, but that's what you accomplished.
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, Henry Kissinger probably could have told him that. But so I want to go quickly to two things. One of them is the Crocus City Hall attack. You were in Moscow recently. I was in Moscow recently. I was there during that when that attack unfolded. It was quite an eerie atmosphere there during that period. And then you started to get the clues, Larry, the who might be planning it, who might be participating in it. So if you were to profile this scene, Larry, as a CSI counterterrorism, is it not true that the U.S. and other of their allies have a lot of activity in the Chechnyan separatist movements over the years?
Oh, yeah.
Tajikistan. So if you know all that, Larry, and you're trying to piece this together, how would you piece this story together?
I think the United States and the United Kingdom, through MI6 and CIA, were enablers of the plot. I think the plot was carried out and organized by Ukraine using Islamic assets that had been fighting with Ukrainian forces for over 2 years. This was orchestrated in a variety of ways. And by way, just establish why I'm so confident of this. When I joined State Department's Office of Counterterrorism in 1989, I showed up 1st of October, and one of the very first policies, tasks that we were wrestling with was the 10 months, 11 months after the bombing of the airliner Pan Am 103, which a bomb blew up on board, broke up over Scotland, killed everybody on board and people on the ground. There was the belief, and it was circulating amongst the public, that the U.S. government knew this attack was going to take place and therefore failed to warn all Americans to stay off. But instead, they just told CIA and State Department officials, don't get on the plane. Well, that was a lie. It wasn't true. I know one DOD guy from a top secret unit, his nickname was Tiny. He died on that plane. So, it wasn't true that they were forced, that they were prevented. But the policy we were faced with, under what circumstances are we going to warn American citizens about a terrorist threat? And the policy that was developed and implemented back in 1989, not 2015, as Cy Hirsch and some others have reported, was that you're going to warn if you have credible intelligence, you believe it's true, but it's not so specific that you can prevent a terrorist attack. Now, it looks like that's exactly what they had, except very, very odd. So let's walk through this day by day what happened. On Thursday, Financial Times puts out an article in which Biden administration officials in the U.S. intelligence community are complaining about what they call unwarranted, brazen attacks by Ukraine. That Ukraine's doing these crazy terrorist attacks. They're doing things on their own without our approval. Oh. And then that same thing was retweeted by a guy on X / Twitter, goes under the name OSI Defender, which stands for Open Source Intelligence Defender. As I've looked at his stuff, he's been used as a front man for the intelligence community to pass along, political spin, etc. He put out the same thing, unauthorized brazen attack. On Friday, the 7th, they announce that, stay away from concert halls, large public gatherings, but specifically concert halls for the next 48 hours. Now, I handled intelligence starting in 1985. And that entire period, and I handled it up through 2016, I have never seen any kind of intelligence with respect to any kind of terrorist threat or possible incident, which would say the threat's good for the next 48 hours. Because that implies after 48 hours, there's no more threat. So when the embassy issued that warning, it was good for 48 hours. 48 hours comes and goes, nothing happens. So you have to make a decision. Was it just bullshit intelligence? Possibly. Or did the security measures that the security forces take, did that prevent the attack? Maybe. But at that point, is the threat gone? And if the threat was still potentially viable, then it was incumbent upon State Department and Embassy Moscow to reissue the warning. We don't know where, we don't know when, but we do believe that this is in the picture. They did not do that. Now, you've had two different articles, one by Cy Hirsch come out and one by Shane Johnson, is it? No relation, writing at the Washington Post. And the Washington Post claims that U.S. intelligence officials specifically told the Russians, oh, there's going to be an attack at Crocus Theater, and the Russians didn't do anything to stop it. Therefore, Putin's bad. The Russians are incompetent. This is all on them. Cy Hirsch has a slightly different version of that we told him there was going to be a threat. We just didn't tell him it was going to be Crocus Theater. My point with all of that is I'm calling bullshit, because if they had the threat information and it was credible but not specific, they had a responsibility. U.S. government had a responsibility to warn people like you who were still there. And they didn't. They didn't warn. And then it happens, oh, this is all the Russians' fault. And to make it even better, within 55 minutes, we're not even sure the shooters have left the facility. We don't know if they're holding people hostage. We don't know how many have been killed. We don't know what weapons were used. We don't know how the fires got started. We don't know anything. And the Biden administration comes out and goes, oh, it wasn't Ukraine. We know it wasn't Ukraine. Now, if you're a Russian intelligence officer, you're saying, well, the only way you could know that is because you know who the hell did it then. And you held that back from us. So I don't know if I think what happened is that the CIA knew this attack was going to come at some point. They didn't know when. They knew that the Ukrainians were working on it and working with these Islamic groups. And they were prepared to put the spin out that it was this pure ISIS-K. Because you notice that once the Biden White House spoke up, then Germany, France, the United Kingdom, Italy, Spain, it sounded like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. You know, it was ISIS, it was it's like it's singing it over and over. Yeah, that's not suspicious. It's all, they sold it. But the downside to it is they put together this plot and they still leave some things hanging. The fact that they used cryptocurrency, when I heard that, I go, boy, these guys are dead. Because people believe that cryptocurrency is, it's super secret. You can't trace it. They haven't heard of blockchain, which is at the core of cryptocurrency. And with blockchain, it has an audit trail you can follow. It's like start at the yellow brick road. Sing it and follow, and all the way you get the Oz. That's what the Russians are doing. So they're investigating it, and it just makes the West look complicit. Not just foolish, but complicit.
So, yeah, there's a few dead giveaways there. ISIS-K also, this Khorasan construct is shady, to say the least. We don't need to go into that now. I just want to get your take on that, Larry, because if you understand the history of the Caucasus region and the
Right.
fomentation of destabilization in this region over the years, then a lot of what you're seeing here might not surprise you so much, the actors and so forth.
Well, in fact, the West has not written very, very, very much at all about the start of the war in Chechnya and in Dagestan going in 1999, because there is evidence, as you correctly note, that it was Western funds flowing in. Now, the irony of this is, in 98, you'd had the attack on the U.S. embassies in Tanzania and Kenya by ISIS, by Al-Qaeda. And then in 2000, you had the attack on the USS Cole in Yemen, again, Al-Qaeda. Then September 2001, the 9/11 attacks. And at that point, you would think there would be a natural alliance between the United States working with governments like Syria, but more importantly, Russia, in combating these Sunni Salafist terrorist groups. But in fact, it looks like the West, on the one hand, was fighting Al-Qaeda where it could, but then helping fund the Islamic insurgency there in Chechnya, which went on for, till 2009, I believe, is when Putin finally defeated it. But it's, that's you got this real disconnect between a lot of CIA operations and what we claim is the national policy of the United States.
And even Russia warned the United States about Tamerlan Tazarnov, one of the alleged Boston bombers, who had gone to the Caucasus for this conference. It was kind of like a separatist conference, and they told the U.S. intelligence, hey, this looks fishy. You should look into this. So there is that exchange of information. This is kind of a courtesy that states might give each other. But I realize, Larry, there's a lot more behind the scenes going on, of course, that even is above our pay grade, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, if you got specific information, you can and should share it with a foreign intelligence service. And there are ways you can share it without compromise. Generally, ways you can share it without compromising the source. Though I am aware of one instance back in, was it 90, 91, where the CIA had an intelligence asset, human source, that provided information about an upcoming attack on one of our embassies in the Middle East. And it was very specific, and it was considered credible. But the problem we ran into is, in order to act on that information, it was going to possibly compromise the source, because the source was actually part of the group. It went back and forth, but my boss, Ambassador Busby, finally prevailed. He said, no, we're going to warn. We're going to take action to stop this. We're not going to let it happen. And, I think the source ended up getting killed. So there is that. There's that risk. That can happen. That's the price. That's one of the prices you can pay in this business. But this notion that if you've got credible information and you're not passing it along to warn specifically, and even the New York Times admitted, oh yeah, the agency withheld information from the Russians. I mean, what the hell? Either you're going to help them prevent it, or you're going to be a facilitator of it. And in my view, I think the United States and the United Kingdom are both facilitators, not preventers.
And then follow the money is the other old adage, Larry. I know you spent a lot of your career doing just that. You're following money trails in your investigations. So who would pay for this type of thing? I mean, is there a big slush fund? Andrei Durkash, he's one of those Ukrainian whistleblowers that's been kind of excommunicated. He said there's a giant slush fund because of all this Western money that's poured in through USAID and everything, that for terrorist attacks, for blowing up bridges, for assassinations. That's what he's saying. What about, is this a big problem we're seeing here? Is there a lot of money available now for this?
I'm skeptical of it because, there wasn't a lot of money involved with this. This was a small amount of money.
Which is even more frightening, actually.
Yeah. Look, the reality is if you gave me $50,000, I think I could bring the United States to a halt, a grinding halt for at least 3 or 4 days. Get a group of former special forces, special operations guys. Get the right kind of weapons, guys who have explosives training. Good Lord, we could do a lot of sabotage and a lot of attacks without necessarily having to go head on with a security force. There's a lot of things you could do that would just, create mayhem. And so it's, it wouldn't be an enormous amount of money. You could do that. Now, I'm not advocating that. I'm just pointing out that I try to think through from the planning standpoint. So these guys get, $5,000, yet they were doing a lot of traveling. Who was buying those tickets? Did they pay for them in cash? Did they pay for them with a credit card? That's one of the things you start looking at when you get into following the money. I've heard so frequently in the West from both the CIA and follow the money, and they never do. That's what my small consulting firm, myself and my partner John Moynihan, what we specialized in, and our other partner, now retired, Bob Nieves. We actually did follow the money. We were able to track it, trace it, figure out who was, where it came from, and we did that. We did that in a civil racketeering case that we brought on behalf of the European Union against major tobacco companies, including Philip Morris. Philip Morris settled that suit for $1.5 billion, which sounds like a lot of money, but that was 1 week of cash flow for them. But we were able to show how they were receiving money that came from drug proceeds, and they were picking it up from a known drug trafficker in Colombia. Was one of the trails of evidence that we unearthed. So this they very well can do that, and it looks like that's what Russia's doing now. They're just pulling at the threads on this sweater, and it's unraveling, and they're going to find out everybody, a good majority of people who are involved, and then they can decide to act. They're under no pressure. The thing people really ought to ask themselves is, if this kind of attack's so easy, why don't they happen every day? So there's a reason why, they don't happen with great frequency. A lot of it boils down to people don't want to get caught. And in this case, these guys are just so dumb. They bought into some vague promises, and next thing you know, they're trying to skedaddle across the Ukraine border, and they get caught before they get there. Bad choice.
Some of these characters were gallivanting around Syria, other conflict zones. So it's like, is there a database? I remember it was Robin Cook said Al-Qaeda means the base or the database. As a former British foreign secretary. There must be a database of eligible fighters of certain capabilities, of certain nationalities, because they seem to move around like chess pieces on a board, Larry.
Yeah, to my knowledge, there's not. I mean, not even in the U.S. government do they keep those kinds of databases. What I noticed that these guys were not well trained. They were not well experienced with weapons, with firearms. The muzzle discipline on their guns was lacking. They were carrying it in a very casual, with that kind of AK rifle, you're going to carry it in a ready position, waist level across your chest, so that you can quickly and easily maneuver it. Where now they're letting it hang down to the side, which means you got to, you have to raise it. It'd cost you a second or two if you got into a shootout. So, and they didn't have good, what I'd call coordinated combat moves together. They're moving as a group, but not in any kind of coordinated fashion. So, go ahead.
What would you say was the object of that attack in Crocus City Hall? There must be some kind of objective. What bigger objective we can guess? But what sort of things come to mind when you're looking at that?
Use faux Muslims who appear to be of Russian, involved, at least part of Russia's heritage, in order to cause racial strife, ethnic strife, to gin up hatred against Muslims, and to try to raise criticism, against like the Chechen battalion, who's just, kicking the hell out of the Ukrainians. They'd love for them to go home. So yeah, I think that was the purpose, because these guys weren't even good Muslims. They claimed that there's the oath, the Shahada, there is no God but God, and Muhammad is the true prophet. They recite this. And when you recite it, you're supposed to with your, right hand up in the air. Well, these guys were all left-handed. They're doing this. Now, some people said, oh, you could have, the image was reversed. Well, if I'm doing this, you can see the pictures behind me, which are still reading in the right direction. And that's exactly, you could see behind them, the pictures were in this. So they did the left hand, which means they had no clue what they were doing. So they were mercenaries hired to do this. And, they said, we just want you to go in and shoot up, kill as many as you can, and get away. Okay. And when you get to the other side of Ukraine, we'll pay the rest of the money. Okay. There was no cause, no purpose, because they weren't clued in on that. This is what we want you to do. Somebody else had the cause and purpose in mind. And I think it was to create racial, ethnic strife in Russia, and to raise serious questions about the competence of Vladimir Putin and the security services. Because note, that was the theme that started coming out in the New York Times, in the Washington Post, in Cy Hirsch. These intelligence officials are all out spinning the same story. I don't believe in coincidence.
It's good that you survey the media, which is really important, because that's part of this whole equation. You got to look at all the different dimensions, the political, the economic, the media messaging as well. Very important. I think this is why you're very good on your analysis, Larry. But there's one part of the analysis that a lot of people struggle with, and maybe this will be a good fitting place to end the conversation. John Mearsheimer talks a lot about the balance of resolve as a factor in who is going to prevail at the end of this phase of a conflict. Now, people are talking about Israel being completely, overmatching any of the Hamas or any of the resistance forces in the region, whatever. But then they say the same thing, there have been for a couple of years, about NATO supplying Ukraine with seemingly endless stream of funds and weapons. Mm-hmm. But who has the balance of resolve? In other words, Larry, are they all? Ukrainians don't have the same political timeline that the Russians have, and Israel doesn't have the same political timeline that the Palestinians or Hezbollah have. But this is not talked about very much in people's analysis of these events. How would you put it? How would you characterize this factor?
I make it very simple. Manpower. How many people do you got? Now, let's start with Ukraine. Ukraine has a finite number of people, and that finite number is shrinking. It's not growing. I guess they could, they say to make a new soldier, you need 19 years. You gotta impregnate the woman, have her gestate, give birth, and then raise the kid, and then put him in the military. So the physical losses that the Ukrainian military has suffered has represented not just the loss of people, living, breathing human beings, but loss of experience and competence in handling certain weapon systems. So now the replacements that come in have far less experience, maybe no training whatsoever, and maybe not even as good a physical condition. We've already heard that the average age in the Ukrainian military is 43, 44. There's no way to reverse that. There is no reversal for that. This is the equivalent of Thelma and Louise driving off the cliff into the Grand Canyon. Once the wheels leave the ground, you are then governed by the laws of gravity. And it doesn't matter how loud you scream, how fast you move, how young you are, how old you are, the gravity is going to take you to a certain conclusion, which means that car is going to crash. And that's exactly what's happening to Ukraine. they're in the process of crashing. Israel is in the same boat. Israel also finite number of soldiers. They're not having as many babies as the Palestinians. And even though they've killed over 13,000 Palestinian children and are killing them at the rate of 90 a day, Palestinians are still having more babies than the Israelis. And the Arabs in general are having more babies than the Israelis. Israel is losing soldiers. They lose them according to conventional physical wounds, being killed in combat, and some that are suffering severe emotional stress, battle fatigue. You got to replace them with something. And they've already shown that their efforts to try to mobilize a new group, people are bugging out. They're leaving. They're not sticking around. Israel, the love it or leave it. They're choosing to leave it. So, I think it doesn't matter what weapon system you give them. In fact, if you give an advanced weapon system, it presupposes that they're trained to use it. Well, most are not trained to use it. And we have seen repeatedly throughout, particularly in Ukraine, that the West is supplying the Ukrainians with weapons that normally might require, say, a 4 to 6 month training period. They're giving it to them and compressing that to a 1 month or a few weeks. And then they're shocked and surprised when it doesn't work as advertised.
Yeah, that's the factor that you can't cheat those realities. Unfortunately, for Ukraine in this case, for Israel, I think they have a very short fuse politically. They've got some big problems, as does Zelensky. So in those two, it's interesting. We're coming to these two seminal major events in history that could break some of the big superpowers. It could break NATO on the Ukrainian side. It could break Israel, which has been a regional hegemon in the Middle East for a very long time.
Yeah. And we didn't even talk about the United States trying to go to war with China. Hey, when, they forgot the old adage, when you're in a hole, stop digging.
Yeah.
They're digging deeper.
If you dig long enough, you'll get to China. You remember that old one?
Yeah.
So, Larry, I really appreciate your time and your perspective on some of these issues, especially on the technical side, because of your background, your experience. I think it's really important that we kind of explore some of these areas, these crevices of the issues, because I think there's a lot of answers there, and the truth will eventually be borne out in history. And yourself, you've probably been vindicated a lot over the last couple of years. I'm sure that's been recognized, as have your colleagues, Ray McGovern and your other colleagues on Judge Napolitano's show as well.
Yeah, Scott Ritter and Phil Giraldi and Doug McGregor, the whole crew.
Yep, you guys have all been vindicated for the positions that you took, which were unpopular early on, politically unpopular, but now are becoming kind of received wisdom, basically. So I think that's probably why you do what you do, and that's why you guys spend so much time doing what you do, and we really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me, man, and we'll certainly be back in touch.
Yeah, definitely. And I'll catch up to you on the back channel. In the meantime, we're going to go to an intermission. Larry Johnson, fantastic CIA operative, former private investigator investigating financial crimes, as well as a great geopolitical analyst. Really appreciate you joining us on the Sunday Wire this week.
Thanks.
Take care, Larry.